Watch this. No way!
Hello and welcome back to the Cookie Jar Golf Podcast. I am Tom Mills and today I'm joined by Sam Williams.
Hello.
As always, guys, you can get in touch with us at Cookie Jar Golf on all of our social media channels. Keep an eye on YouTube. We are dropping some sensational content, probably bragging a touch there, but some great content over the next coming weeks, which we're really, really excited to push out to you. So make sure you keep an eye on that, and I'm sure on Twitter and Instagram we'll be letting you know about it too. But keep an eye on it because we're really excited about it. Today we've got really high quality podcast for you guys. We've got two guests on from Evalu18, which if you don't know much about Evalu18, we're hoping that you will do by the end of this podcast. It's Jasper and Sam that have come on. They're two of four of the guys that run Evalu18. And without further ado, let's introduce Jasper and Sam. How are you doing, guys? Welcome to the pod.
Yeah, doing very well. Thanks for having us.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks for having us on.
Absolute pleasure, guys. No problem at all. Why don't we kick this one off with the obvious question? What is Evalu18? What's it all about, and how did you guys get to know each other?
So perhaps I'll start. Evalu18 in the beginning was nothing more than a Google map with pins in it, basically. I had found that when I came to the UK from Canada, I was starting to find golf courses in and around London that I had never heard of before that were actually really decent golf courses, quite different than what I had come across. And the only real record I could find of any of these courses were books from, some from Tom Doak, but even more so Frank Penning's books. He had two books that he wrote, Golfer's Companion, and I think the other one, Game of Golf, one of the two. And I was carrying these around in my car, and if I was in an area for business, I would finish my meeting and kind of walk out to the boot of my car, clubs in there, take the books out, see if there was anything nearby. And I just thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I started taking some of the information from there and then putting it onto this Google map. And that was essentially the beginning of Evalu18. That map got shared with some mates of mine that were visiting from Canada and the States as they came over for business or meetings or whatever it might be. I would say, look, here's a map. You might find some decent golf here that you might not know about. And they kind of said, yeah, it's a great resource. Can we, why don't you make this available? So as a hobby, that kind of kicked off the development of Evalu18, basically just a collection or repository of pins on a map.
Wow. It's almost like all great projects start with a map and just sticking pins in them, don't they? How many good stories start like that, right? And then how did you and Sam come together?
So basically we started working on a map. There's a project that I undertook for St. Andrews, the Old Course. So when I was reading a lot of these old golf course architecture books, all of the famous architects always talked about the superiority of the Old Course and what made it so great and why it was so much better than every other course. So the idea was that I had to look at the Old Course from the perspective of the time that they were living in. So from early 1900s to probably 1930, because obviously courses evolve, courses change, technology moves on. And so I started this historical project. Once I had that map basically done with call-outs and all sorts of information there, I got in touch with Joe. And Joe had posted a few bits and pieces on Twitter. And he's a very talented artist. And we collaborated on this first map. I provided a lot of the architectural insight, and he provided the artistic side of things. And obviously, Sam is a member of Hoylake, and so is Joe. So there's an actual connection there. And eventually all three of us got together.
So the original maps, were they just were you hand drawn, or were you just looking on Google Maps and saying this is what I want to deal with? How did that work?
Yeah, so the original map for St. Andrews, obviously there's quite a collection, but the original inspiration was Mackenzie's map from the early 20s that now hangs in the secretary's office. So it's in the back of quite a few of these old architectural books, like C.B. Macdonald, I think, has one in the back of his. He kind of folded out, and there's 3 or 4 pages that you can, take a look at, A3 type thing. And it has these callouts. So there's like a line that will go from a bunker and it'll say, oh, this is Crescent Bunker, Cottage Bunker, or Hell Bunker, whatever it might be. And I just thought, wouldn't it be really cool if you could get one map that has all of the landmarks of the old course called out on one map? And I realized like quite early on that map didn't exist. So some of the bits on Mackenzie's map, they're not called out, but you can go back to basically the early 19th century, even before Alan Robertson. And there's maps of the old course that have different features that are mentioned and called out, and so basically it started from going back all the way to that, all the way up to the modern day, and trying to collate all of this information. But Scott McPherson was a big help. He's an architect that spent quite a lot of time at St. Andrews. He's written a couple of books. And he's probably one of the foremost scholars of the old course as far as the historical, background to it. So he's been very helpful as well. And he wrote a book, The Evolution of the Old Course. So that was quite instrumental, as well as like all these other Golden Age books that have been written about the old course.
Yeah. So Joe was probably he was the reason that we got together. And it's only a sort of, we're complete golf nerds and we love the architecture and we love the history. And Joe and I we'd been talking sort of, we have this WhatsApp and every day we'd have found a picture of something, and Hoylake as our home course was our sort of shared passion. And we'd probably spent six months of doing a bit of research and digging up old things on the course and old plans and everything else. And this was at the same time that Joe and Jasper had been working on this fabulous map. So this was before I'd met Jasper. And it sort of all came from that, because when the map that Jasper has described went out, and I'm sure most people will have seen the map of the old course that he's talking about, when it went out, the response from everyone was just crazy. It was not just a technically accurate map that appeals to nerds like us who are interested in that kind of thing, but the fact it's beautiful as well, and it looks fantastic. And so many people said we want to have it hanging on the wall. And there are some pretty famous people now who have reached out to Jasper and Joe and myself and said, can we get a copy of it? And it's crazy, the response.
They're absolutely stunning, Sam. And I think, it's right that we say on the pod now that Joe can't be here because you've got him locked up in a sort of a strong room, just working 24/7 now, because the rate those things are appearing on Twitter is unbelievable. And the quality, and their watercolors, and I'm starting to see things appearing of architects, and you guys are doing stuff overseas with different clubs. It's genuinely, the watercolors are, the websites we'll come on to, but the watercolors are absolutely stunning pieces of work. And yeah,
the application for them is huge, and it's just the fact they are something so unique. The perspective from looking straight down. All of the old, Golf Atlas books and things like that, and they have this oblique sort of look down the course, and they're rendered and it looks clunky, and it looks, the old stroke savers, they're fine and they do the job and they give the yardage, but they don't look anything like Joe produces. And who knows where it's going to end up, but it's there's going to be more and more clubs who are interested in having it done for sure.
You heard it here first. Watercolor stroke savers. Here we go. But you say, Jasper, you started off with pins in a map, and then the map started to come about. Evalu18 now is so much more than just the maps. Can you just sort of outline to our listeners maybe what you encompass?
Yeah. So. Again, after I started playing some of these courses, you started to realize that there was a commonality between a lot of them. So you would go to a course, then you come away and you think, well, who is responsible for that? And then you do some research, and it would be Harry Colt or Tom Simpson or Alistair Mackenzie. And those names never meant anything to me 10 years ago. So I kind of filed that away. And it actually boiled down to an Amazon order. So basically what happened was I had read a little bit on Golf Club Atlas. I had listened to a little bit on the Fried Egg and some of Andy's stuff, and I realized that there wasn't a lot of that was going on in this country. So I kind of had an idea that this existed, but I didn't really know the full picture of it. And we needed to get free shipping on one of our Amazon orders. This is like pre-Prime. So I think we had to spend 20 quid, and I just needed like a few pence. So I ended up getting a couple of books that basically launched me into the architectural side of things. And I think one of them was Nicholas's book, and one of them was Trent Jones's book, which, again, looking back on it now, yeah, it's a little bit
golden
crazy.
age stuff, is it, really?
No, not at all. But the first few chapters in those books basically opened up my eyes to the fact that this, golf course architecture was an actual thing, that it existed, and people actually thought about how they laid out a golf course. And up to that point, it had been, I didn't even know this existed. So from there, it was a tendency to go down these like rabbit warrens, where you just get really intense, and you order every single book you can possibly imagine about it and read it in a fortnight, and digest it. So that's essentially what happened for about 3 years. I was constantly ordering books, anything I could get my hands on to read. And as I got that information, I started to basically build up the information on the website. So if I found a course that I thought was decent, or I knew someone else that I respected or I'd learned something from, they said, "Oh, you got to go here to check this out. Do research on it. Read what I could about it, and then go and check it out, see what it was." So basically, the information that we have now on Evalu18, which is constantly growing, is a repository of all of that information, all collated together against this map, so that you can search for all these different things. So I know for myself, I'm a massive JF Abercrombie fan, and by extension, a Tom Simpson fan. So for me, if I have a choice, I'm going to be down in Surrey for a day. Where am I going to go? Well, it's going to be, Worplesson or Coombe Hill, or, New Zealand or West Byfleet, or wherever it might be. But, some people might know about those big clubs like the Worplestons or the Coombe Hills. But, when was the last time someone spoke about West Byfleet? So for me, that was kind of, let's pull back those curtains and show people, what's there. And just because it's not a course that you necessarily haven't heard about doesn't mean it's not brilliant golf. So that's kind of the motive behind the whole thing, was just creating somewhere that could be accessible for people to enjoy that journey for themselves.
I should probably add as well, Jasper, having looked at the stuff that's in the journal section on your website, which there are some fabulous books on there, the shipping cost on those books is a inconsequential cost when you look at some of those. And I think you're quite good on the website in terms of calling out, where it's been a valuable purchase and where it's not. And I think that's kind of good, because some of these things are almost kind of sacred relics that you've pulled out and handed over extremely large sums of money for, to kind of in the quest for acquiring knowledge. One of the things you talk about there, Jasper, is, I guess, partly what Evalu18 to me, as someone who uses the site, not based on kind of, what we're talking about now, but as someone who's used the site, is it allows you to use different dimensions to evaluate whether or not you want to go and play a golf course ultimately. And it takes it off this kind of two-dimensional, very transactional, here's a rank, and it's ranked 1 to 100. It's always ranked 1 to 100 for no particular reason other than the fact that it's just a very good way of telling people how good a golf course is. And I just think it's such a kind of basic way of saying whether or not you should play golf course. When you think there's so many factors, what I enjoy in a golf course is totally different to other people. So I kind of looked, and you guys did this big piece on, rank the rankings and talk about the different rankings that exist. So just talk to us about the different ways in kind of how you both look at golf courses, and how there's different factors, right? This isn't just a case of golf course on its own merit. Just tell us a little bit about that.
So, I mean, for me, I love a day at Muirfield. I love a day at Sandwich. I think just part of the whole golf experience is, showing up with a jacket and a tie, and, enjoying the intricacies of club life. I absolutely think that's brilliant. However, at the same time, I can very much enjoy a Brora or a Münchenhampton experience where, you walk out to the first tee and there's probably sheep, cattle, or llamas in the way. And to me, they still, those are equivalent experiences. It's both good. It's all good golf. So the presentation might be different. The experience as a whole is two ends of the spectrum. But as far as I'm concerned, one doesn't necessarily have to be good golf or bad golf. From what I think is it's good golf. It's, on the merits of golf, it works. So it's just different. And I think that's the thing with rankings that I find is that, part of the reason behind that article that you spoke of was to try and establish, what are they actually ranking? So you say a golf course is ranked at 26, but actually when you look into it, you've calculated amenities like a spa or a restaurant or, and that's all fine and good. If that's part of what you think makes golf good is whether they have, a 5-course meal at the end of the day. Great, but
Tom really likes that, Jasper. So don't badmouth it. Tom really likes the spa. Everywhere there is any of that.
The facials.
He's all the trappings.
So, I mean, and I guess that's what it is. It depends on which ranking is right for you. And I think that's the point that we make is that we're not saying one ranking is better than another, but we just want to be transparent about what you're actually ranking. If it's simply the golf. Well, maybe National Club Golfer is the one for you. If you want to think about the resort and the spa, then there's probably one for you out there. But golf for me is golf. It's what happens between the first tee and the 18th green. And that's the merits for the golf course.
I completely agree and think there's different hats that I wear. So sometimes, I'm Hoylake through and through. I've been there forever. It's one of the second oldest links in England, and we have a great history. And I love going and playing matches against other Royal clubs and captain's matches and scratch matches. And we have our jacket and tie on, and we have a big lunch afterwards. And it's the camaraderie and everything else that comes with it. That's fantastic, and that can never be reflected. And I appreciate that. If you're talking about club matches, a lot of people don't have that, and it's a good side of golf. However, equally, I think that if I think of all of the courses that I've played over the last 12 months or so, one of my most enjoyable days was playing at Durness on the northwest tip of Scotland. It's a 9-hole course, different tees, so you can have 18 great holes. It was blowing an absolute gale when I was there, and I mean 40, 50 mile an hour winds. And I think they have forgive me, maybe one or two greenkeepers, and they have a small clubhouse, but it's an honesty box, and you put your 20 quid in, and you go and play golf. And Harriet, my wife, and I, we were driving around the North Coast 500, and I played Dornoch with a friend there, one of my favourite courses in the country, brilliant. But did I have any more or less fun when I played 9-hole Durness for 20 quid? No, it was just different. And there are so many places like that people will never have heard of and will never go to. And I've been trying to find them on Google Maps, and there are loads on Jasper on Evalu18, and it's a brilliant resource for finding them. But there are courses that are on Google Maps that you can't even see when you're looking at it. And, it's some island off the west coast of Scotland, and I'm looking at it and I'm zoomed in. I'm saying, is that a bunker? Is that a green? Is it a sheep? You can't tell because no one goes there. No one writes anything about it. And I can't wait to help populate the Evalu18 and hope more people find it, because there's so much golf out there. And it doesn't have to be a manicured parkland, water fountains, spa. That's fine if you want that kind of thing. But for me, there's a lot more to it than that.
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because you've got Dornoch, and you can be paying a lot of money for a green fee and then paying 10% for equally as much fun. And it's interesting, I think, that being in the media industry now, we kind of have the mantle that we need to represent some of these places that are not well enough represented, and we've got to kind of give them the props they deserve. I mean, what's happened recently, I don't know whether you've noticed that Mike Clayton, who's a a former guest on the pod, has written an article about design rankings or design rankings versus beauty contests. And one of the paragraphs he writes is that, some of these design rankings, some of the factors that are included are things like conditioning, ambience, and playability, when in reality, they're nothing to do with course design and nothing to do with how they play. I mean, what are your guys' opinions on those three things, so conditioning and the ambience and the playability, compared to integral things like course design?
Well, I read Mike's piece. I thought it was great. And for me, golf over the past, whatever it is, 10, 20, 30 years, I'm not saying everywhere, and I'm not saying it does, but there may be a case of the Augustification of golf courses, and they need to be presented with perfect greens and perfect fairways and tees, and the golf clubs themselves will have a green staff of X, whatever it may be, and they have so many man hours per week and so much machinery and water and everything else, and they say, right, okay, how are we going to utilize our time to present the course? And if the only thing that matters is perfect greens and perfect fairways, then that's where they're going to spend their time, because that's what they think their green committees want, and what the punters who come and play, whether they're members or visitors, that's what they want. But if that comes at the expense of less interesting bunkering, tree management and the trees encroach, it comes with smaller greens, it comes with whatever, it's greener, so because they want to put more water on it so it looks nicer, but it's softer and it doesn't get the same, it doesn't play with the strategic design as it was meant to. Does that mean it's better? I personally don't think it does, but that's something that I think the more guys who are maybe more interested in these kind of things, because it seems to be a bit of a, maybe it's just my echo chamber on Twitter, but it seems to be more people who are interested in this kind of golden age architecture resurgence again now, and they're going to find themselves on committees over the next 10, 15 years, whatever it is, and might start to think about these things again a little more, and that's what I hope.
Well, I think kind of, Sam, that's probably one of the great things about Evalu18, is because if having perfectly manicured fairways and, greens running at the speed of marble and a 5-star spa experience afterwards is what you value in golf, and that might be the case, then actually you can hunt that down through what you're doing. And that's one of the great things you're doing in terms of looking at different dimensions. Personally, yeah, I would agree. Are we overly hung up in terms of condition of fairway and having greens that roll like lightning, when actually you've got to remember the golf course as it was designed? And you go back 140, 150 years ago, they wouldn't have been dreaming of 12 on a stimp. There wouldn't have even been a stimp. So, and fairways would have been cut short and just left to kind of go. They wouldn't have been overseeded every few weeks and wouldn't need to have rolled like lawns. So, I think there's a huge amount of truth in that. And I think, like you say, Clayton's piece on rankings is spot on, because it becomes too much of an objective exercise to work your way down, not up. And actually golf should be enjoyed by kind of looking for what's the experience I'm in for. Do you know what? Do I want to go out with my mates and drive for 12 hours to the middle of nowhere, stay in a bed and breakfast at £15 a night and kind of have an unreal experience? Or do I want to go away and maybe take my sticks on a break with my wife and enjoy some luxury and play a bit of good golf? So I think there's a lot of truth in that. I do want to segue into, I hope you don't mind putting you on the spot here, Sam, but you've got a bit of an adventure coming up in the next few months. There's quite a bit on this, isn't there? So would you mind just telling us a little bit about it? I'll be honest, I'm going to be living vicariously through you for the next few months.
Yeah, so basically, Harriet, my wife, and I, we completely lost the plot over lockdown. And so we're very fortunate. We work for ourselves, we work in property, and we were sat there over lockdown thinking, God, what's the next 6 months, 12 months going to look like? When are we going to be able to pick up where we left off? And we were going through a bit of a phase where we were looking to do a little bit more, and we thought no one knows, no one can predict what's going to happen. So if we're going to step back a little, well, then why not take the opportunity of time that's being presented to us and make the most of it? So we've always, the trip that I mentioned when we went to Durness last year, Dornoch and Brora, we drove on the North Coast 500, the route around the North Coast of Scotland. And out of all of the holidays that we've been on over the last, 5-10 years, that was one of the most enjoyable that we had. It was so much fun. And we didn't have to get on the plane or do anything. We just drove up. We started in St Andrews and we worked our way up. And we thought, well, why don't we look at doing something like that? And we fell down this YouTube rabbit hole, and we're on van life stuff. And yeah, so we're going to go and move from our house just down the road from Hoylake and going to go and live in a van. And to that end, there are now 170 golf courses, links golf courses, on my list. Many of them have, it was Jasper's map on Evalu18. I basically just got the map out and said, okay, if I'm going to play some golf, I love links golf. Why don't I try and see all of the links courses in Britain that are worth seeing? And people come from all over the world to come and play golf in Britain. Maybe not this year, but they will again. And as I say, there's great courses that no one's ever heard of. And there are probably even a few more than I can find on websites and books and everything else that are out there. Courses up in Orkney, which is Orkney in the Shetland Islands and off the west coast of Ireland. And people know about Scotland, sorry. People know about Askanish. It's been relatively talked about in recent years. But on those islands of South Euston, Harris, there are half a dozen golf courses. And they all look fantastic from what I can find. So we thought, let's go and have a look and see what we can see.
And I take it from your story, your wife is a very avid golfer.
You'd think so, but no. So she's a reluctant caddy, I think.
She's a very patient wife, Tom, not a very avid golfer. I think we're
That's the one. That's the one.
So in your travels, what are the ones you're really, really keen to tick off? What's the ones you're thinking? So
I'm more, not necessarily more, but I'd say just as excited to go and find these ones on the west coast of Scotland that no one's ever heard of than I am to go and see the more classic East Coast courses. Because I've played probably the majority of the top East Coast courses, and like Jasper says, the day at Muirfield is one of the great experiences of golf, and to play the old course and to play Kingsbarns, and they're all very different, and some are more classic members clubs, and Kingsbarns isn't, but it's a fabulous golf course, and all the way up to Dornoch there's a lot of very well-known golf courses. But if you look at most maps of Scotland and you look at the courses, there is a real glut on the east coast. And by the time you get past Turnberry, Prestwick, Western Gales, Troon, there's very little on the west. You go out to Campbelltown kind of area, and you've got Machrihanish and Jura now and those others, Shiskeen around there. So you've got a glut there. But very, very little, and it doesn't mean they're not necessarily there. Scots love their golf, so there's loads of golf courses, but they just seem to be 9-hole courses or a little 12-holer where they don't have any kind of publicity at all. And as we found with Durness, does that mean they're not worth playing? Absolutely not.
Yeah, we had Tom Coyne on the pod, and he said that when he walked around, it was like the ones he found were the 9-holers that all there was a brown sign saying 9-hole golf course around the corner. Some of the best golf he ever played in his life. So it's very, very jealous, Sam. Very jealous.
Are you doing Ireland? You might have said it's always hard with UK and Ireland. Are you covering a bit of Ireland as well, Sam?
Well, we'll see how we get on. We're sticking to Scotland primarily for the rest of the year. Those 170 odd courses, they're just on Great Britain, so Scotland, England, and Wales. Some of the best golf in the world is again just a ferry ride away in Ireland, and it's fun. I'll digress ever so slightly, but one of the best golfing buddies trips I've been on. We were very lucky. Last year we went to Portmarnock. We've got some great friends at Portmarnock, County Down as the two headlines, and then there were a group of, I think there were maybe 6 of us, and we'd been hosted by friends at those two places, world-class golf courses, and then we were on our way back. We were flying back from Belfast, and we just went online and turned up at Royal Belfast, which is Parkland course, kind of by the water, and it was wet when we were there. We were there in October. It was wet and muddy, and you'd think by comparison to the other two big hitters, it wouldn't be as fun. But we had such an amazing time because we were there playing an 8-some foursome, 8-ball foursome match, and just having a great time. And again, that's something that you can't equate to a ranking or anything else, because if you've finished the day and you've had a cracking time with your mates playing golf, then that's what it's about, surely.
It's just so much on the experience, isn't it? And I think I find it hard, probably I'll be honest here, 99% of golfers will find it really hard to isolate their best golfing experience when it doesn't coincide with being a day where they play particularly well. But, nevertheless, those days where you're with your pals and you're playing, in a large group, be it in a foursomes or otherwise, and just having a great day at a place that I think a lot of it is like, I don't know, you could make it a bit highfalutin and liken it to maybe wine, but ultimately it's where you've gone into something and it's far exceeded your expectation. And for me, great days at golf are always the ones where your expectations are below what's actually delivered. Anything in the other way always works out differently. Jasper, you spend tons of time out on the road. You go out and see these golf courses. I mean, from when we spoke briefly, it sounds like, kind of very regularly spending out time with different golf courses, walking the tracks. How do you get to capture some of that in terms of everything that Evalu18's doing? Everything from not just the course routing, the architecture, but everything else the club has to offer?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when I head to a golf course, I try to avoid playing it, if that makes any sense at all. When I go to a golf course, I usually try to objectively look at it first. If I'm just going out to play golf, it doesn't really matter. I like to show up on the first tee, warm up a little bit, strike a few putts, and then head out and just not think about it. Just play. But when I go to a golf course to try and understand what's going on, it's quite different. So it's more of a cerebral approach. I'll try and take my time to think about it, to think about, at the moment I'm doing a little bit of work on some Abercrombie courses, just trying to understand his design ethos, what he did in various situations, how he dealt with different landforms and things like boundary walls or roads through the property, just to try and figure out what he did in various situations. So, you get to a hole and you're looking at it from a perspective of what have I seen him do in different situations. So, the first hole at Bovey Castle, okay, that's similar to perhaps, the elevated tee at number 3 at Knoll Park, for example. What did he do and where did he go about it? So I think from that point of view, it's more of an intellectual approach. You're not really feeling golf, if that makes sense. But I find that to be quite satisfying as well. I can lie awake at night and just thinking about, like, why would that string of pearls be that way? And how come those fairway bunkers were running that way? And why did he have 2 bunkers there as opposed to 3? And why did he have 1 bunker on that front of the green and not? So it's that type of thing that allows you to get insight. You're almost profiling this architect by trying to peel back the layers to figure out what he was trying to do and why it works. And I think that side of golf when I travel to courses and look at courses and trying to expose myself to a variety of different designs and architects. It's just trying to gain that insight, that understanding of what makes this golf good.
It's fascinating because I look at, like, you look at the history of golf, and I always, incorrectly probably, but liken it back to almost like the butterfly effect. So, I don't know, if Colt quite liked warmer climes, would he have gone down to Australia and taken the gig at, Royal Melbourne? I don't know. And then if that had happened, what would have happened with global golf course architecture as a result? And would things have looked radically different? Granted, they're slightly more nuanced than maybe Hollywood would pitch the butterfly effect as. But in the world of golf, I think it's quite significant. And you don't always have, there doesn't seem to be really good accounts around what architects did. A lot of it feels like hearsay. And looking on your, working through the profiles of different architects, you published one recently on Herbert Fowler. There's quite a bit written about people like Mackenzie and Colt and some of the mainstays. But you look at people like Herbert Fowler, and it's not always that detailed in terms of what they did, and it's almost quite conflicting as well. So you look at his design ethos. How do you go about wrangling it? I mean, you take Fowler as an example because you've looked into it, and even by your own admission, you would probably say it's really hard to figure out how much they would have fought for their own design ethos, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is one thing you've got to keep in mind, and this is whenever I do research, one of the things that I've come across is that you'll go to a course and they'll say, "Oh, it's a Colt course," and you think, okay. So, like, Colt laid it out in probably like 1912 before World War I. It interrupted the exercise, and then he cracked on with it after World War I finished. So, like, it basically was a farm for 8 years. And by that time, he probably had 20 other projects on. So he probably didn't even show up to the site. He just farmed it out to, like, Harris, and they came and built it. And, when you look at Colt's early work, as opposed to, like, his work in the 1910 to 1920s and the 1920s to 1930s, and then, he goes abroad. And, when people say, I've got a Colt course, well, like, what Colt course are you talking about? Like, which era is the Colt from? The same thing could be said for a lot of these architects. They wrote quite a lot, whether that was books or whether it was newspaper articles. But one of the architects that really stays true to, like, his original ethos is Tom Simpson, and that's probably because with the Woking connection with John Lowe and Stuart Patton. It was basically at that point he had fixed in his mind the strategic golf, how it was going to work, minimalism, how one bunker can affect, not one, two bunkers basically in the middle of the fourth fairway, can affect this whole hole. So when you look at golf courses, you have to remember the era that they were built in. So that could, like, what was possible when they were building the courses with regards to machinery, what was possible with manpower, what was possible with equipment, what kind of ball were they using, what kind of shafts were they playing, all of these different factors contribute towards the decisions that they were making. So it's interesting with the Fowler piece that was written and put up on the website. That's from quite early on, pre-World War I. And he puts in par fives at 9 and 10, and then he finishes with 3 par fives back to back to back to finish like 16, 17, 18. Now, if you ask most people today, was how Herbert Fowler a genius, you would say, oh yeah, he's a brilliant golf course architect. But if you came around to a golf course that had, like, finished with 9 as a par 5, started with 10 as a par 5, and then finished par 5, par 5, par 5, you'd be thinking to yourself, like, who is this guy? So it's interesting that I think back then, and maybe that's why it works, is that you go to these golf courses that Sam was talking about. You go to the Durness or some of these courses that were laid out, and they're not inhibited by the so-called rules of golf course architecture. What does the land give you? I don't have a D6 dozer to push around like tons and thousands cubic yards, and I just got to work with what I'm given here. So these guys, they just lay out the course as the land is there, and And in the beginning, I guess that's kind of the way it was. You just kind of had to work with what you had. So a lot of these golf course architects, like, to pin them down and say, well, all Colt bunkers have flash faces. Not the way it works. There's quite a different variation between early Colt bunkers and late Colt bunkers. So yeah, you just got to keep in mind, really, I guess, the areas that they existed in and what they're trying to accomplish, and the clients even that they were working for. How deep were their pockets? How much did they want to impress?
And you're right. You think of the old course, and if you say, okay, almost with the exception of the first, the rest of the first half dozen holes are basically blind, and from the tee, you've got 2 par threes. It's not just like what became commonplace in the post Second World War up to probably the core Crenshaw, Tom Doak, and everyone else in the sort of rebirth of golden age architecture 2.0. You don't have to have 2 par fives, 2 par threes on the front and the back nine, and have these 2 loops of nines that come back to the clubhouse, and this very formulaic and restrictive set of rules. And some of the oldest courses didn't have to deal with that because they didn't become established norms that people expected when those courses were laid out. And some of the courses that I've talked about, the ones where 9 holes is enough, and you don't have to have this thing because people are going to come and people are going to post a review on TripAdvisor at the end of it and say that course was rubbish because it only had 3 par threes or had 3 par fives to finish, as Jasper says. It's if you become unencumbered by these arbitrary rules of what a golf course should be, then you have so much more option for creativity that you lose otherwise.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because Colt stands out as someone that was probably the least formulaic of the golden age architects. And if you look at someone like our home course, which is Blackwell in the Midlands, which was a Fowler-Simpson course, primarily Simpson, has got a lot of the Simpson sort of design aspects that you would expect. And it's got fairway bunkers on the right, and they like to triangulate the holes and have an odd number of bunkers around the greens and that sort of thing. And Colt kind of stands out where he kind of went against that a little bit and wasn't so formulaic in his approach. But outside of Colt, do you think understanding course architects and understanding how they design courses has helped you develop into be a better golfer by understanding how they wanted you to play the course?
We've floored them here, Tom, with that question. You've given them 2 options. They've got to admit that they're either struggling with their game or they can look exceptionally arrogant. I don't know who's going to go first here out of Jasper and Sam.
I'm going to let Sam go. I will weigh in on it.
The thing is, I don't know how many of these courses that we talk about, how many of them truly retain their strategic design ideas that they originally laid out to. Now, everyone goes on about the driver and the golf ball going too far. And, if you're talking about the original layout, then of course the bunkers are completely in the wrong place nowadays for most guys. But also it's not just the driver, it's the lob wedge and the irons. And if you are completely out of position being defined as whichever architect it was, he said, okay, this is if you want to attack this green, you go down the right-hand side to open up the channel, and it's risk reward. And the 17th at the old course, if I hit my ball 20 yards left of the fairway because I don't want to go in the hotel, it's an extreme example. So I am still having to contend with the bunker and the wall and the angle of the green if I'm coming in from the left. But I have a much better chance of managing that with my 60-degree lob wedge, with the grooves on it that are going to spin my Pro V1 and have a chance of holding the green, than young Tom Morris did with his niblick and his gutty ball. There is no comparison. So I think that one of the best competitions or professional events that I'd say most people have watched in relatively recent times was the President's Cup at Royal Melbourne the other year. And that is probably one of few courses that has retained the strategic elements of course because it still has the width and it still has the firmness. And I watched Tiger Woods as a kid in 2006 win the Open at my home course, and the course was as brown and firm as anywhere. I played, I remember, the day after on the Monday, and you couldn't stop your ball on the green. It was just like rock shooting off through the back. But Tiger Woods came on and he hit 2-iron everywhere, and he put on an iron masterclass, as he often does, and he won. And then Tiger Woods, 13 years later, plays in his President's Cup team, and did anyone play better than Tiger Woods? Possibly not. You know, it shows that when the course retains the strategic ideals that it was designed to, and keeps the firmness and keeps the width and the angles, then it's as relevant now as it was when Mackenzie first laid it out. But so many courses, budgets maybe don't allow, and the fairways get narrower because they want one line of irrigation heads down the centre of the fairway because it's cheaper, and they don't want to maintain the trees. So all of a sudden the width and the angles everyone talks about has disappeared, and the bunkers have changed, and it's soft and everything else that we've talked about. And you can read about these old courses and think, God, but wasn't that such a great design, because you've got to think about this bunker here and then this angle into the green here. But in reality nowadays, what do? You stand there, you smack driver over the bunker and you hit a lob wedge onto the green, and often it goes very wrong, as it does for me, maybe not for you guys, but when it goes right, it's completely toothless. And that's parts, I would say, losing the strategic design ideals and the equipment and everything else that we all talk about.
I think there's a lot of truth there. I think it's a good example as well. I mean, Hoylake's a great example, 2006 with Woods' win, where it becomes a leveler because really anyone can find the distance. It's more positional play because actually it's running like a car park. And, you know, the great champions, you know, inevitably come through in firm and fast playing conditions. I think Bobby Jones went there in 1930 and on the, I think, a 16th green or something, or the 18th, he stiffed a bunker shot, and they were dipping between groups. They were tipping a bucket of water around the hole just to give players a fighting chance in between to kind of allow them to get near. I look at this and think America's massively further evolved in terms of thinking about golf courses for the future. And it's really easy to get caught into the trap, almost like we are maybe now for the last 40 odd minutes, talking about golden age design. Wasn't it wonderful? And there was all this kind of, you know, they were so much more, you know, aware back then of how golf should be played. And then we drift into this post-war world where it all sort of just crumbles apart. But America seems to be much further advanced in their thinking. And I wonder whether what makes us great in the UK, which is I can play any golf course in the UK, give or take. There's obviously some exclusions there, for a fee. And therefore people replicate golf as they see it on TV, versus in America, I can't play golf anywhere for a certain fee, and therefore innovation thrives. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking, is there some truth in that? And that's where you're starting to see your Bandon Dunes. You start to see huge renovations to places like Pinehurst that were almost kind of lost in terms of Ross's initial design. You see places like Sweetens Cove, Winter Park, all these kind of different formats, different takes on the game, all starting to thrive. I don't know whether
those are basically the ones you can play for $200. Maybe not Pinehurst number 2, but everything that Mike Kaiser's done for golf in America over the last 20 years has probably, we wouldn't be having this conversation now if this Chicago businessman hadn't decided to take a punt on bringing over a Scottish architect over to Oregon and building Bandon Dunes. And the runaway success of that means that you can, and when we were talking before about you don't need a spa and you don't need everything perfectly manicured. Well, sadly, we were meant to be going to Bandon. It was one of the COVID casualties of this year, and hopefully we'll go next year.
You had a few by all accounts, but we won't go into that now.
No, let's not. But it's, somewhere you can go, and it's all about the golf, and you don't need this palatial clubhouse and 5-star hotel. There's places to go for that, and it's very nice when you do. And like I say, everyone enjoys a spa, but equally you want to go
and water features on the 18th hole. He really likes them as well. So.
But going somewhere and you just play golf, and you might play 36, you might go and play the par 3 course afterwards, and you're with your mates and you have some beers and you have a good time. And there seems to be more and more people copying that model because it's proven to be successful, because people like to get back to the crux of what golf is, and it's that out of nature, the camaraderie and everything else. But there were so many years of the Faziers and the Nicholaises and the RTJs and everything else that maybe it was down a different path, and it's taken someone like Mike Kaiser to wrestle it back to these principles.
What I think is interesting, certainly from my point of view, is that from the US side of things, certainly that Bandon and Sweetens and all these things that are kind of pay and play, and it's becoming kind of the mecca of American golf, is just the basic model of British golf. And I think what's really fantastic about bringing it all around the circle as to what you guys are doing is this stuff isn't the rarity here in Britain. This stuff is the norm in Britain, and we can go play some of these courses that are just on our doorstep, and it's so available to us. And I think we forget how blessed we are here in the UK with just courses coming out of our ears about how good we have it here.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think for me, my perspective is I'm coming from Canada. So, I grew up buying Golf Digest magazine and turning to the back page and opening it up, and it's trips to, play the old course for £3,500. And then at the time, you do the conversion and it was 9,000 Canadian dollars. And you think, flip, that's 6 months worth of wages for my dad. And, there's no way in hell I'll ever get over to England to see this, or Scotland to see the old course, let alone all the other courses. So, for me, it was just a pipe dream. So I basically had to be quite content with just, playing. So what do you shoot for? Well, in Canada growing up, it's I've got my local municipal course, but, the big golf magazine in Canada says that this resort course is the best course. So, okay, I'm going to move heaven and earth to try and figure out how to play that course. If I can't afford to play it, well, I'm going to figure out a way to pick range balls so that they'll let me play it. And that's what I did. And, okay, we played a bit of golf and, amateur tournaments, things like that, and got around and played some decent golf. But I think the brilliant thing, we talk about America being so far ahead that it's almost that Britain, England is so far behind that it's almost leading the pack again. You talked about coming full circle. It's almost like the fact that you're lagging behind. It's actually the fact that now you're almost ahead of the game again. So because we haven't gone down the road of 70 years after World War I, that we just basically we're good. The courses are good at how they are, and why would we want to change them? And I think they're, served us well for the last 70 years. Why can't it serve us well for the next 70 years? Yeah, exactly. But it's almost because you haven't gone through a lot of the courses, perhaps other than maintenance or tree management, they really haven't changed since World War II, a lot of them. And to be quite honest, a lot of the changes that have occurred on a lot of these courses since World War II haven't necessarily done them any favors. So you've almost got a situation where you've got a golf course that's essentially untouched, and it just needs to be polished a bit and sorted out a little bit. And all of a sudden it's it went from being a little bit neglected because we like it that way to being world class. And one of the examples of those is the Addington in London. Absolutely stunning golf course. Again, JF Abercrombie, a little bit of Colt influence. Now they got CDP working in there. We talked about Mike Clayton before. what they're going to do with the Addington, like if you don't know about the Addington now, you will know about it in 5 years, because it will be world class. And it's a sensational golf course. But because they haven't touched it and they haven't messed with it, it's actually right where it needs to be to become like world class again. So it's almost the fact that you've missed that whole middle bit, that you're exactly where you want to be moving forward. And the fact that you're so far behind America, it's actually not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing.
It's interesting you mentioned those guys. I mean, we got Clayton and Pont and Mackenzie and Ebert doing a lot of good renovation work here in the UK. I mean, the Addington itself is, from what I understand, is kind of overgrown a little bit. It's got a lot of blind tee shots and a lot of really sort of throwback to the olden things going on back at the Addington.
Yeah, I mean, as far as blind tee shots, I think eight plays uphill. Basically the way you look from the tee, you know what you're meant to do. It's a bit of a hog's back on the top of the hill. You get from the tee that you're supposed to like hit it down the middle. Then you get to the top of it and the fairway kind of falls away on both sides. Then you've got this amazing green set on this hog back that kind of falls away like into a valley at the back. I think on a lot of them, like the tee shots, not necessarily blind, but there's lots of forced carries, but not ridiculously. It might be visually intimidating, but that's always nice because when you pull it off, you feel good about yourself, which is quite nice. But the 12th, if you build a hole like the 12th now, that par 3, or even the hole before it, where you kind of hit off and then it like steps down, this crazy, hillside. Again, if you did that now, people would say, "Oh, well, what is this guy on? What was he thinking?" But they did it then, and it was amazing, and it's still amazing now. But yeah, the Addington is it's an incredible golf course, and it's only one that you're going to hear more about moving forward.
It makes me think of like an old grand house that's apparently so. Ryan, the owner, is the perfect owner for the attic. It's proprietary owned, and he's the one bringing in Frank Pont and CDP guys, and to have a course like that, like Jasper says, it hasn't been buggered up by someone else in the 70s or 80s because they wanted to homogenize it and make it like we've talked about, make it resorty or anything else. So the fact that it was glossed over for so long means, okay, the trees are, the fairways are probably a quarter of the playing corridors between the trees are probably a quarter or a third of what they were when it was designed. But it's only words. They can be stripped out again, and they will be. And the course that they'll find, it will probably be one of the best sort of golden age design courses, like we've talked about. And it's in London, and it's there, and it's just waiting to be smartened up and brought back to its former glory and refurbished.
I think there's a hell of a big plan there, isn't there? I've certainly seen that they're embarking on quite a big long-term plan there. I mean, just in terms of the golf that people enjoy in the UK, where do you see that at the moment? In terms of, I look at it and think, well, I suppose, like you said, a lot of courses would benefit from some of this restoration work to bring back maybe golden age principles. But where do you see people's kind of take on golf at the moment? I think we've seen an increase in playership post-lockdown because it's one of the few sports you can get into, but people seeing a good side or a bad side or maybe just their side of golf. Like, what's your take on all that?
So I think from my perspective is, I think we spoke about this previously, that there's a growing awareness. The tide is rising with regards to an understanding of golf course architecture. I mean, you look back at the newspapers that were in, there was like a weekly article in major newspapers in the United Kingdom about the benefits and the strategy of golf course design. Ardent golfers, like post World War I to World War II, I mean, you pick up a Sunday newspaper and you could be guaranteed that there's going to be an article about golf and probably about the merits of some hole or course on architectural grounds somewhere in that newspaper. And I think, personally, I think that awareness is growing. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that the market in America is so much bigger. Part of that is due to just the fact that they have a lot more people than we have here. And by extension, they have a lot more golfers. And, you know, they have the PGA Tour, which brings a lot of eyes and ears to, you know, to golf there. However, I think that's one thing that has taken me a few years to appreciate coming from Canada, coming to the UK, is how good the golf actually is. So I think you'll probably find a few things. Most people now, you know, they'll come to Ireland and they'll play a few big courses. They'll come to Scotland and play the few big courses. But I think England and Wales will have a bit of a resurgence moving forward. People will start to appreciate, you know, the sandwiches, the deals, the princes, the golf that's on offer. And I think within the golf community that already exists in the UK, just because of people like yourself and hopefully people like us that are trying to raise awareness of the immense privilege that we have to play in a country that has so much great golf on our doorstep, that those people will find an interest there. And I think that's the point for me, is that we don't need 10 casual golfers to take an interest in golf course architecture, because actually if you just have one serious golfer that says, oh man, there's a lot to learn and enjoy and understand about golf course architecture, he'll do far more for the game and far more for your podcast and your website and our website than 10 average club golfers that, you know, just want to go out and have a few beers with the guys. So I don't think it's necessarily all about numbers, but I do think that we're well positioned moving forward to take advantage of this rising tide of awareness, and that can only be a good thing, because, you know, we are absolutely rich when it comes to what we have here, and it's just sometimes to help people understand what they've got, but also to help clubs understand what they've got as well.
I agree entirely, and it's not you know, we'll, with the Evalu18 and what you guys are doing and Instagram and everything else, there's a lot that we can do to sort of showcase some of these places. But if you can't go on holiday this year because it's been cancelled with COVID and quarantine or whatever, and you're a golfer somewhere in the middle of the country, go and play some links golf somewhere. It doesn't matter where you are. You know, we're such a small country. You can go anywhere in a few hours drive. And if you go down to Kent and, okay, to play Royal St George's in the height of summer, it's not particularly cheap, but maybe George isn't the best example if they've got the Open next year, because you'll be on mats. But to play in the autumn and the winter, links golf, it will probably be blowing a gale, but you're not going to get any mud on your shoes. You're not going to lose a golf ball, and you're not going to have too much of an inferior time. You can have a great time. And where I am in the northwest, you know, we've got Hoylake, Birkdale down the road, Royal Lytham down the road, and all of the Open Championships that are being held there. But you've got Formby, you've got West Lancs, you've got Hillside, you've got SNA, you've got Wallasey, you've got so many great golf courses, and you can play them on the 1st of January or the 1st of July, and they'll be different. The rough will be longer in the middle of the summer. But apart from that, it's fine turfs, and it's not going to be muddy. Your ball's certainly not going to plug in the fairway or be miserable. You can go and have a great time, and it will cost you relatively little to do it. It certainly costs you a lot less than going to wherever it is on the plane and staying in a hotel. If you just drive, stay in the local B&B and have a few good days with your mates playing some world-class links golf that you don't get. And then there's no better place, and I think lockdown made us all appreciate that a bit more. There's no better place to spend your day than on a golf course. Go up to Silloth, go to you know, wherever, Littlestone or wherever it may be, and that's the benefits of Jasper's map. You know, they're all over the place, and you might have to drive a little bit further, but guarantee it'll be worthwhile doing. And
it's part of the fun. It's part of the fun, isn't it? At the end of the day, that's all. That's what we're in it for. It's for the adventure. We're certainly not in it for a living. With a few scant,
No, we'd be in trouble if we
with a
were.
few scant minutes that are remaining, with the exception of the artwork, which is fabulous, that I'm sure you will point people towards. Jasper, Sam, where would you point people towards on your website to find out more?
I think just the interactive map. I mean, if you head to the homepage, there's one click, and basically it'll find you. So if you're in the UK, you click on the map, and it'll basically show you where there's decent golf right next door to you. So hopefully you're not too far away from that. We do try and keep up with journal articles just to keep something of interest there to make people think. So tomorrow we'll put out a little bit on Herbert Fowler and his ideal golf course. But yeah, I think it's the map really, and then we're constantly trying to add information to the golf courses' individual profiles. And as we go and see courses and we add to them, we kind of give our take on them. We try and do a little bit of a Tom Doak-esque type review, not as
Once it's cutting.
as the confidential guide. But anyways, the beautiful thing is that we probably don't have any courses on the website that are Doak 1s, 2s, or 3s. So, we can basically just bang on about how good the good ones are that are on there without having to worry too much about the other ones. But just head to the website, have a little mooch, and you'll probably find something that will interest you, and you'll be able to find the type of golf that you like. And I think that's, for me, if you're a Lynx fan and you're from Wales, well, you'll find those courses. If you're in the Surrey Sandbelt, you'll find those courses. And if you like, resorts and the facials like Tom does that we find out.
Just point me towards the stars. That would be great.
Then I think we have a total package collection, which basically is the courses that still offer good golf, but also you can get your massage and your palatial suite as well. So
Tom's all about the room service. All about the room service. Jasper and Sam, I would stress this is your first time on the pod. Not thank you for appearing on the pod. I'm looking forward to getting you guys back on in due course. And apologies in advance for spamming you with updates, Sam, as you go around the UK exploring the shores. And I mean, if I've got one parting gift for you, it will be pack your waterproof, son. You're going to need them. So
yeah, well, I'm just glad someone will be following me along.
But no, it's been an absolute blast, guys. I really thank you for coming on the pod, and genuinely, what you're doing in the game is absolutely awesome, and we wish you all the very best with it, and we look forward until when we speak again. So many thanks.
Very kind. Thanks, guys.
Watch this.